Right, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to kick off. My name is Ashley McCall. I'm the CEO of ThinkForward. A very, very warm welcome to everyone who has jumped online to join us for the launch of our research findings for addressing race inequity and risk of exclusion through coaching. I'm going to introduce my fellow panelists in just a moment. I just wanted to remind everybody that we are actually recording this webinar. We want to make sure that we get as many people to view the kind of unpacking of the research findings as many people as possible. So we will be recording and we will be making this available online after the session. So I just want to say a very, very warm welcome to my co-panelists, Juro Oye, who is the CEO and founder of 2020 Levels. Juro has warmly accepted an invitation to facilitate part of the session this afternoon, and we're really fortunate to have Juro join us. So thank you, Juro. I've got Lewis Howell also. Lewis has just dropped offline, but he will be joining us in just a moment. Lewis is the founder and MD of 7PK and Revolution Hive. And Lewis has worked strategically with the organisation with ThinkForward, but he's also supported us on some of the programme design, which again, we'll go into some detail in a moment. And also joining me is Patrice Etienne, and he is head of the inclusion programmes that we have at ThinkForward. He is responsible for the mobilisation and the launch of this programme that we're going to talk about. And we'll be hearing more from him during the panel discussion once we start unpacking some of the key themes. So we are your panel for this afternoon, and we will take you through our research findings piece by piece, allowing some unpacking, as I said, of the detail. And there is also an opportunity for you to ask questions. It's not the only opportunity that you'll get, but it would be really helpful if there's any burning questions that you've got. Please don't hesitate to ask those, and we'll try and pick out some of those before we close the session. Okay. Let's go. So I think before we get into the kind of meat of the research report, I think context is really important. It's really important to think about what were the things that were happening in the world at the time that we decided to potentially respond to what we felt was a really acute need in London. I think many of you will remember the death of George Floyd, what was happening in the world around Black Lives Matter. Certainly around that time as an organisation, we made some strategic decisions to start thinking about what our role was in addressing race inequity, certainly in the people that we worked with. And we started to look at what the needs were, and in particular, what was happening in London. A commissioning opportunity arose, and we felt that actually, having done a lot of learning as an organisation, we felt actually we felt we had something to offer. We felt that we had something to potentially offer in that space. So we were looking specifically at what the need looked like. London is a particularly stark area around inequity. Black Caribbean students are more likely to be excluded than white British students, and we know that from the data. Young Black men are twice as likely to be unemployed compared to young white men in London, and we know what that data looks like. And pupils eligible for free school meals are more than 4 times likely to be excluded. Now, you can already see that's a really complex kind of set of intersectionality around gender, around race, around poverty. And again, we felt that there were some really stark needs that needed to be responded to. So that's the kind of context in which the drivers for us deciding to design a programme and start delivering in this space. In terms of the programme that we designed, we called it Future Leaders. When I say we, our young people decided upon the name, which we were absolutely thrilled about. And that says something about their level of aspiration of the young people that we were working with. They see themselves as aspiring leaders, and of course we do too. Race equity within programme design had to be at the heart of our thinking around what it is we were trying to address. We have a long history of delivering coaching programs to young people from underserved communities. So the coaching aspect of what we do was pretty much kind of, we're fairly confident around that. But actually, we had never designed a program which really tackled a very specific vulnerability in young people. And the context which I've just set out for you, we felt race equity was the one. That's the lens through which we needed to design. We needed to consider culture, race, and identity in every design decision. And that's essentially was our start of a 10. The second area that we decided to focus on was Black representation. Now, I've already spoken about some of the things that we were doing as an organisation. We were thinking about our role in race inequity. We were thinking about how, as an organisation, we could ensure that there were progression routes in our organisation for our aspiring leaders within our own organisation, sort of progression pathways. So that actually worked really nicely with opportunities around running and designing and delivering and mobilising a new programme. So actually we had lots of fantastic Black staff in the organisation who were looking for career progression and were actually looking at what their career pathways might look like. And that worked really well because Black representation on that programme was incredibly important to us in that programme design piece. We also have made some decisions strategically as an organisation around working with Black-led organisations, especially in a piece like this. We've done some strategic work with Lewis that I've mentioned already. He was supporting us as an organisation on our race equity journey. But of course, Lewis's organisation and the other kind of partners and ecosystem that Lewis exists within was able to support our design of a programme and a delivery element to the programme. So actually Lewis was holding two potential positions around the organisation, supporting our race equity journey, and then about delivery and design of the programme too. So they were the kind of features of that programme design piece. And again, I cannot stress this enough. As an organisation, we wouldn't have felt any legitimacy or any credibility in designing such a programme had we not been so committed in actually going through a race equity journey ourselves and feeling like we really had something to offer in this space. Okay, you've heard a bit from me already, but now let's listen to the really important voices of our young people. Joe, can you run the video, please?
It's a great program because you're able to get one-to-one mentoring, coaching. They also give you the ability to go on work experience opportunities that your school may not offer. You know, just go to certain businesses for insight days so that you can figure out your future and stuff like that.
People from my background, they think that the people out there that are not trying to help them, but they think just because of where they're from, they can't make it far in terms with the jobs and that. So someone from my area to get an opportunity that this would be life-changing for them.
I feel like it's important for this to be in place for young people in my background, because being in a society where young Black men are typically not given the same chance as other ethnic backgrounds or other races, just gives us that additional advantage and just a head start from everyone else.
Going to other businesses and seeing Black mentors was like kind of inspirational to me because like I'm able to see people that look like me, dress like me, have hair like me in higher places, so it was a surreal feeling.
Patrice is a very good coach. The fact that he can get a very close bond to me is a good thing because I don't really let a lot of people into my life in a way. And I feel like Patrice has been part of my journey and I can see that he actually cares.
I changed a lot as a person because when this program started back at the back end of year 10, throughout that whole of year 10, I was quite a troublesome student. I used to get in trouble a lot. I used to sit a lot of detentions and I used to be in isolation a lot. Since being on the program, they've been able to, help me manage my behavior a lot. They've managed to help me create a lot of things that will help towards my future, which has now, made me the mature young man that I am right now.
Amazing, thank you. Patrice getting a lot of love in that film. Was he the director of that by any chance? I'm kind of thinking he might have had a hand in some of the things that were said in that. Okay. Right, so I'm going to hand over now to Duro to facilitate the next part of our discussion, and we're going to dig into some of these themes in a bit more detail. Black representation, I've already mentioned how important that was in the design of the programme. Some of the kind of key things that came out from the work that we did with our young people was that positive adult relationship, new opportunities and developing goals, and then we're going to look at new skills in a little bit more detail. So I'm going to hand over to Duro and he's going to facilitate a discussion with Patrice and Lewis.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ashley, and thank you once again for asking me to moderate this panel. I love the video. Things like that really just warms my heart, hearing directly from young people that have been impacted by the programs, and just having them speak from the heart. So Patrice, big up yourself for all the love that you're getting. I know what goes into that panel work, and for the young people to speak authentically about the impact you had on them, priceless, man. So yeah, love to see it. So let's get into it. Theme 1. Black representation. That's one of the things that also came across quite strongly in the video clip that we just watched as well. Black talent is significantly underrepresented in some of the most highest paying and influential sectors in the UK. Only about 2% of finance, insurance, and professional service employees are Black, while 4.4% of the UK working age population is Black. How important is race and identity in the program design? And how did it help young people explore whilst on the program? Lewis, has come to you for the first one.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one because I think, we often hear sayings like, people can't be what they can't see. And obviously I do align with that and I do agree with that. But I think it's important that when we talk about this from, your question, Juro, was about program design as well. I think it's very easy to put Black faces in nice places, for example, and therefore assume that aspect of representation is therefore going to solve problems. But if we're not careful, that can be very performative. That can also be very tokenistic. So when you talk about embedding that representation into the design process, it's not just about having the Black body there. It's about saying, actually, how do we ensure that the perspectives, experiences, and nuances that are specific to, in this case, where the previous program was targeted at young Black men, that we can really account for those lived experiences within how we're designing the program, from the way in which we think the coaching should be delivered, from the way in which we think the aspects of professional as well as peer mentoring should be delivered, from the way in which we may ask those companies and organizations who host those young people for the mentoring sessions, or who may host those young people for insight days and work experiences, are they being intentional about allowing them to go beyond just seeing Black people in those spaces, but actually connecting with Black people in those spaces? Because we want to go beyond simply representation and start to think about relationship building. And I think that's what's most important, because when you think about a lot of the experiences the boys had on this program, it was the relationships they were able to develop with the Black professionals who mentored them. Also, those Black professionals they may have connected with at companies through insight days and things like that, which allowed them to then genuinely experience the transformation and the feeling that we were looking for, which is, this is possible for me. Just having the touch point is a start, but the relationship development is most important. So in terms of designing the program, I was very clear, for example, within the mentoring aspect, that listen, from session one, as soon as you walk in, we're going to spend a strong 45 minutes to an hour just delving into why it's so important for you to take pride in your inherited culture. If that means your ethnicity says, your heritage says that you are a young person who is not just from the continent of Africa by way of heritage, but the specific country you are from, maybe the specific tribe you are from. If you're from the Caribbean, the culture that comes from being from that island, or whatever part of the diaspora, which is a word I'm not trying to use as much because of semantics. But anyway, whatever heritage you're coming from, like, let's take pride in that. And I want you to walk in that unapologetically. So when you leave today, I want you to say your name with pride. I want you to say that you're from this place with pride. So then that way, if we put that into the design and delivery, they're walking through this, I realize that actually it's not just a privilege for me to be here, it's a privilege for them to have me. Do you know what I'm saying? It's a privilege for them to have
100%.
me here. So that's how we want it to be done.
100%.
So yeah, man, for me, that was a big part of why representation was critical.
I love that. Thank you so much, Lewis. Key thing that I'm taking away from your response is that relationship building. A lot of the young people that are part of the program are used to kind of being let down, being sold a dream, being dangled something in front of them, and then all of a sudden it disappears. But there is power in that relationship building, and instilling that in them right from the outset is absolutely amazing. Patrice, let's move over to you. So how did the program address this when it comes to the element of Black representation?
Yeah, so I want to take it back right to when we started to pitch and approach schools and alternative provisions. I'd say about 50% of the schools and alternative provisions at the time, they kind of questioned why we were just being very specific to young Black men. And they also kind of said to us, basically, well, we have this cohort of young Black men, but we also have a cohort of other kind of, young white men, or etc. And I guess at the time, we all had to look at ourselves and just be really unapologetic in, actually, no, we just want to particularly focus on young Black men and not, I guess, deviate from that. So right from the beginning, during the pitching and approaching schools, even when it was difficult in getting the numbers, we just made sure we stuck with our cohorts being young black men. So we made sure we created that space where young black men could explore their identity. I guess the second way in which we did it as well was through a robust program promise. So the idea was that each term, each young man would get 3 one-to-one coaching sessions with me. That's all about the goal settings, essentially them leading that, them being empowered to follow their own choices, right? So we help facilitate that, but they lead it. We don't tell them what to do at all. It's also each term, every young person, we spoke to their parents or their carers, just to make sure the parent and carers were, I guess, all part of whatever the young person's goal was, just to make sure that we're all moving in a holistic way forward to helping that young person reach their goal. Also, the Ready for Work events, that's taken all of these young boys out into businesses just so that they can see how a business works, right? And a lot of the time in these businesses, we made sure that they could see black people that was like them, that looked like them, like the video said. So they could see that it was achievable and it was doable. And like Lewis was saying, 7PK during the business mentoring workshop. So there were 7 business mentoring workshops with black professionals over 4 months. And yeah, these young men really got to, I guess, explore their identity. We had a few young men who were on the program who were dual heritage, but didn't necessarily identify with the black side of their family. And during the program, they actually got to understand what their identity was more. Does that make sense? So we really had a space that was created to help these young men, yeah, explore their identity. Look like you're going to
No,
say
that's
something, Jerome.
no, I am. I was literally just going to back you up in terms of like the importance of really kind of sticking to your guns and like, this is what the program is set out to do. This is who the program is set out for. In certain cases, you will come up against resistance. It's like, okay, can you add this? Can you add that? And I love the fact that you guys stood your ground and were like, look, this is what the program design is for. And if we're being honest, the stats are in your favor. This group, this demographic need this more than ever. So thank you so much for that, Patrice. Move on to the second theme. Positive adult relationships. There's that word again, relationship. One finding from the research was that from the beginning to the end of the program, there was an 18% increase in young people stating that they had trusted adults that they could talk to. Now, what role does trust, integrity, authenticity play in a program like this? Lewis, let's come to you first. Are you frozen?
So this is an interesting one, right?
Okay.
Because I think for a number of the young people, can you still hear me? Oh yeah. I was gonna say young people, even those who maybe had faced challenges within the educational setting, but were not necessarily in an alternative provision, they may still been in a mainstream school. I know for sure my viewpoint was there's going to be at least one, maybe teacher or someone in the school that they feel they can trust. Yeah, it was very surprising when I had the chance to engage with them throughout business mentoring and otherwise, to hear them say things around like, the fact that they connected with their business mentors. And so my viewpoint is that when you talk about being able to empower young people and suggest to them that they are in control of being able to determine new outcomes in their lives, that message, as well as the support provided to get them to a point where they feel they are in control of their new outcomes, can only come from people they do trust. Because if they've experienced distrust so heavily, be it in an educational setting, be it in familial settings, be it in other community settings, the idea of someone saying, follow this strategy, i.e. coaching, then mentoring, then insight days and all of that, isn't something they're going to buy into. Now, if we know that the program Promise has the ability to empower them to get into not only positive post-16 destinations, but also to really prepare them for being able to thrive in their careers beyond that, it's very important that they can build a trusting relationship with those who are going to take them on that journey, or else they won't fully buy in. And the parts of the program that require them to commit won't be done. So I think that's why the trust was so important within this, and to have an approach where they knew they could trust Patrice. They knew they also had the trust of Kieran, who was the coordinator on the program as well at the time, and had obviously such a strong relationship with them. But also in the way we asked for the mentors to go about engaging with them and to demonstrate a certain level of vulnerability in order to be able to demonstrate where lived experience existed with the mentors and them as well. It meant that they genuinely felt every environment was trusting and every person they engaged with was trusting enough for that message to be received and for them to also then trust in the process we put in place. And I think that's why you get the outcomes that you get.
I love that. Thank you. And talking about outcomes, you know, there's a stat and a quote on the screen there that I can't not mention. It's the second one where it says, "People like me are likely to be successful." At the start of the program, only 64% agreed. At the end of the program, 100% agreed. Astonishing. Patrice, what was it about the program that built trusted relationships with adults?
Do you know what I think it is? One of the main things is persistence, right? So what would happen is at the beginning of each term, I would give schools, young people and their parents slash carers like a timetable of all the things that we're going to be delivering this term, right? And the idea is making sure you deliver on what you say you're going to do. Yeah, that builds a lot of trust with the young people in your service, and that builds a lot of trust with the schools, and that builds a lot of trust with parents and carers. So I'd say definitely persistence. And I guess what builds trusted relationships with adults, it's the one-to-one coaching. It gave me really good and really strong relationships with my young people. Also, yeah, like Lewis was talking about, it is the business mentoring, right? They had 7 touch points with their mentors over 4 months. It's a lot of time to spend, and 2-hour sessions each. And that's a really long time to spend with your mentor on trying to help, I guess, navigate through the school system, but also with these mentors helping you to, I guess, look towards the future. Yeah. So I think, yeah, those are the things that I'd say help to build trusted relationships with adults.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Moving on to the next key theme, new opportunities and developing goals. 30% of the young people are not in education, employment, or training, believe that prejudice or discrimination is the single biggest barrier preventing them from entering the workforce. Why is work like this important for young Black men trying to enter the workforce? Lewis.
So it is very true that their perception is that it's discrimination and prejudice. There's also the reality of discrimination and prejudice. So I'm going to speak to this more from a business mentoring aspect, as well as a peer mentoring aspect, as you can imagine, because I think Patrice can speak so well to that coaching relationship that he had with the young people. But I'm going to speak specifically to some of the content of the mentoring program, actually. So within those 7 touch points that Patrice has mentioned, we covered very, very specific topics each time. You know, I talked about how session 1, for example, revolved heavily around, being able to take pride in your culture and your identity. And then we had sessions that revolved more around, for example, what does communication need to look like in different settings and different environments. And we had sessions that also revolved around being able to overcome some of the existing stereotypes that may come from media propaganda around what it means to be a Black person navigating society from education through to the professional world. We had so many different topics we explored. Now, coming back to your point around overcoming the challenges of prejudice and discrimination, first of all, them being able to hear from adults that they now have a trusting relationship with, who they do feel they are inspired by, and who maybe are in positions that they aspire to, telling them, reality is there is prejudice and discrimination that exists. They're not going there and lying to them and, doing what, unfortunately exists in far too many other spaces, which is, oh, don't worry about it. All you have to do is just be able to work hard and you'll be fine. But those adults saying, no, I'm just going to be real with you. Yeah, I also face challenges related to prejudice and discrimination in education. And when I entered the workplace, I also experienced that. But most importantly, here's how I navigated it. Here's how I looked at where opportunities existed for me to be authentically myself. And where I also acknowledge those spaces that weren't so much for me that were like that. But here's how I did that in a way where I could overcome imposter syndrome and didn't feel I had to go about suppressing who I am. And where I did feel like I had to suppress who I am, here was the journey I went on to become empowered again. Here's how I went about being able to find allies from my community and those who weren't from my community to help me to be able to progress in my career. So it was about equipping them with the game plan through honesty and transparency so that they didn't then feel that these issues of prejudice and discrimination, which either are fed to them more heavily by family members, media, etc., caused them to feel either overwhelmed or as if they weren't welcome, but people gave them the reality of this is how you navigate it. This is how you make it work in your favor. Here's how you can still progress to the highest level in your career, even in and amongst those potential challenges. So I think the honesty and the transparency was so important within this, and to be able to hear directly from people who, as I said, may have lived experience by way of educational challenges, and then also have been able to go from that point to being able to progress and thrive in their careers and say, this is how I did it. That's what helps to overcome and pull back the veil of this is what's the reality, but here's how you can still work within it. So for me, I think that's why I was so intentional about the conversations we have in these mentoring sessions and the activities we do in these mentoring sessions, getting them to the real. So we're not just selling dreams and we're not just painting nice pictures. We're getting to the real of this is what goes on, but here's what the part you need to play, and here's the part that you can then expect employers to be playing. And if the employers aren't doing those things, here's how you also advocate for yourself. Because by the way, if you do enter the workplace and you're experiencing that, just say, you know, here's how it's wrong, and here's how you advocate for yourself. So they need the real from all of the kindness.
No, I couldn't agree more. You know, those real conversations really prepare young people for the world that they're going into, especially if they're new to that world. You know, if we're talking about corporate roles, every company is going to be different, every sector is going to be different. So if you hear directly from someone that has been through it, has navigated it, maybe has failed, have fallen down a couple of times, but they've picked themselves back up, they can equip you with the knowledge, information, and the tools that you need to be able to navigate that space better. Because then what happens is you'll get to the position that they're in a shorter time frame. You know, so I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. Patrice, we'll come back to you. How did this program give young people hope for their future?
I think that's following off of what Lewis was saying about, giving these young people um, the tools to navigate businesses. So what we did was then take the young people on ready for work experiences, which is taking them into a business so they can see what that business is like for the whole day. They got to, I guess, use all of what Lewis was teaching them and their mentors were teaching them and just use it in a really live way and just help to demystify what that workplace could be. Because I think what we should realize as well, a lot of these young men, the adults in their lives, especially from, I say, their educational institutes, schools, or alternative provisions, they had quite negative experiences with adults. So they would go into business or they might go into spaces where there's adults in I guess, a negative kind of space. But in us taking them out really often to these businesses, they started to realize, actually, you know what? I actually belong here. Do you get what I mean? And I think that was really, really important for a lot of them. That's what the young people said to me, and as a result of going into businesses anyway. We also took them to King's College for a day for a English and history day, and let me tell you, they had so much fun um, going into university and doing, I guess, like an intro level university work. And, the teachers were so inspired and so taken back by the levels of confidence that the young men had, and that they could articulate themselves, and they could undertake the work and just do really well with the work. I guess for them as well, back to your question, that helped to give them hope for the future, right? Because they wouldn't normally have been in that sort of environment. So that was amazing. The peer to peer mentoring also was such a huge, I guess, such a huge um such a huge point of growth for them, because they were seeing people mentoring them who were maybe like 2 years older, who were really, really, really doing really well at the time. And they could see, actually, if I could, you know, follow what these young people are also telling me, I can then try to get to that point. Yeah, we really did create, I guess, a safe space for our young people to really explore all of these kind of different things.
I'm so glad that you mentioned the King's College experience. If you didn't bring that up, I would have pulled you up on it, because those kind of opportunities where you, one, create a safe space for young people to be able to be themselves. I mean, you take that space that you created into a whole new environment and allow them to really be able to come out of their shell and really own a space that can never be taken away from them. They're going to remember that for the rest of their lives, where they walked into King's College and they owned that space. You know, they took part in university sessions, a class, a lecture, and they were able to dissect the literature in a way that, you know, it made them feel like, actually, I belong here. I could be here. I can see myself here. Definitely, that's going to open up their aspirations for the future. Lewis, you wanted to add something?
Just very, very briefly, is I think it's one of the research about the first of all, I think it was important when it happened. So that was the first peer mentoring engagement they had. They followed the business mentoring. So she talks about follow-up work that he was doing and colleagues were doing in terms of helping them to feel more comfortable with, you know, environments. After all the things that people needed to throw in the business mentoring, you could see a significant difference by the point we get to, you know, 3-4 months later, they're now going to ships to university. I'll be real, like, they did not fit into the business. They were coming in, I take students, but they've still got, you know, most of them, they still COVID. I, you know, I can imagine that if you go engage with people from our communities, often, you know, I'm seeing thinking, oh, guys, well, when they start speaking and they dissect information to the point where the lecturers are going to ask going, they're doing what? Like,
sorry, Lewis. I thought it was just me. I thought it was just me, but your connection's crackling a little bit. I don't know whether it's where you're holding the microphone. Yeah, it's still the same. It's not the best. So we're catching like every other word. So I don't know if you want to switch out your headphones to try and get. Okay. All right. So just on that note as well, we're about to move on into the final theme, but I want you guys to start thinking about questions that you want to put to the panel as well. So I know we've already got one in, but have a think about the questions that you would like to ask, and also start putting them into the Q&A section, and we'll pick them up shortly after. All right, let's move on to the final theme, new skills. What are the barriers that young people face, and what can be done? What can we do to support them? Lewis, I don't know if your microphone's good now. Let's try. If not, we'll come to Patrice. You're on mute, Lewis. No? All right. We'll give him a second. Patrice.
Yeah, what are the barriers that young people face, and what can we do to support them? I guess some of the barriers that young people talk to me that they're facing are, I guess, people kind of judging them before even giving them a chance to show what they can do. And essentially what we can do to support them, or what we do to support them, what I do and what my team do, is we advocate on their behalf. We make sure that we build spaces where they can, I guess, show their skills, they can show their genius. Yeah, and that's ways that we can definitely help support them. And I guess it's doing things like this, right? It's doing things like this session today, making sure that we, you know, go through all of the evaluation kinds of material and really dig deeper in and understand more about what our young people are facing and how we can help support them.
Amazing. Thank you. Ashley, you're going to come in.
I am, yes. I can't stay quiet for too long. I've stayed quiet for this long, and it's been such a chore for me. Because our panelists are obviously directly involved with our young people and have amazing things to say. But I just wanted to reflect back the number of times I've heard the word navigate. And there is something about the relationship that Patrice and Lewis and the mentors have supported, that have worked directly with our young people through the program, that actually building their resilience to recognize things that are playing out in a workplace by digging into race, identity, culture, and stepping into a place of confidence. I saw the journey of some of our young people. You saw some of that on the film also, the journey of allowing them to step into a place of confidence and developing that resilience around things that are playing out, that are unsaid, unseen, unspoken, is for me one of the most powerful things I've seen play out in the program throughout the duration of it. So there's something about that, helping young people to step into a place of power, of recognition of race and identity, of recognition of where and when it plays out, and developing the skills to navigate those things carefully as they play out during their lives, and certainly during their early careers and in the workplace. And I'm talking about even very small, they're not small and subtle, but they can appear small and subtle, certainly to a white person who wouldn't be observing it. But even walking into a reception area in a very plush corporate environment, 10 boys with potentially hoodies on, et cetera, and actually the response they might get from security or the response they might get from reception, and actually tackling that and not allowing that to go untackled, unspoken, and unseen, and making sure that that doesn't happen again to our young people when they go on experiences in workplaces. So it's kind of really kind of micro and not so macro aggressions, and calling those out where we see them, and then modeling that behavior. So we give permission to young people to tackle that sort of thing as it plays out to them when they're in new spaces. And I think the other thing that I've heard continually throughout this presentation is that creation of space and opportunity. So we're supporting our young people by doing that. We're developing and scaffolding the skills around them to help them survive in those experiences and then thrive and make the most of those opportunities as we open them up. And that for me was repeatedly, I could see that play out at every stage of the program, and each stage of the program, those young people increasing, as I said, in their confidence levels. So, that was an incredible journey to watch, but also the team that were delivering it as well, also stepping into a place of power and saying, actually, this mainly goes unsaid when we're working with young people. We're now going to talk about it and dig into it. And in doing so, we give it some power and we give it some kind of space to explore it and get comfortable with it, as comfortable as you can get with it, but actually develop some skills to navigate it, as I said.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Can I just also add on that as well about more coaching, as in it's such a place where you can empower your young person, like Ashley's saying, you can tackle those kind of courageous conversations, but more coaching just allows our young people, or did allow our young people as well, to really feel empowered about the choices that they're making, the things that they want to do. Yeah, that's another way to support, just lots of coaching.
Even talking about coaching as well, coaching is not something that's easily accessible to the demographic that we're talking about here. They're used to coaching from a sporting perspective, but when it comes to like coaching, like life coaching, career coaching, these kind of coaching it's not open, it's not accessible to the kind of young people that we're working with, and introducing them to them at such a young age. You can imagine what that's going to do for them in their future. Lewis, you had your hand up, and I've got the final question to you as well.
Let's see if Zoom is doing our Zoom. What is going on?
That's actually better. Try it from there. If you sit back. Yeah, maybe.
Okay. Okay. This is just going to speak. Nice.
Nah. Sorry. Patrice, we'll come to you with the last question.
Let's just push.
All right. So what skills are the most important to young people? What are the most important skills to get young people into work?
Yeah. So what skills do they need? I think for sure they need resilience, because as we know, in most jobs, things never quite go according to plan all the time. You need to be agile. You need to be, you need to persist on whatever it is that you're trying to do. You just might have to try and do it another kind of a way. So it's definitely about them being resilient, man, and just not taking knockbacks, because as we grow up, or as we get older, there's always a chance of knockbacks. I think as well, what a lot of the young people spoke to me about, in terms of new skills that they thought helped them a lot, was organization, right? So in organizing their time correctly to make sure that they got to places on time, but also during their GCSEs, right? They created really robust schedules, and a lot of them, did it by themselves. They came up to me and said, you know what, I need a better revision schedule. And essentially, they said actually having good organization really helped them to get to their next step, which is sixth form or an apprenticeship or college. And I think the next one, the next skill that I think is communication. It's just, I think Lewis was saying earlier, it's just about hello, can you hear me?
Yeah. Keep going.
Okay, yeah, something came up on my screen. Yeah, it's just about made me lose my train of thought there. Bringing their
Because something
authentic
came up on
self.
the training. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's just about bringing their authentic selves to, I guess, colleges, apprenticeships, or even jobs, their future jobs. Just be yourself. It's all right. You can you can be yourself and be professional at the same time. Do you see what I mean? You don't have to be someone else to be professional and to be successful in the future. So yeah.
It's super powerful. Being your authentic self. People talk about bringing your full self to work. I like to call it your true unique identity. What makes you you? How can you add that to your work? How can you add that to your day-to-day life? How you carry yourself, how you present yourself, how you communicate. You don't have to pretend to be something that you're not. Helping young Black men believe that, quite simply, they're enough. Nothing more powerful than that. Lewis, you want to try without the microphone or the headphones? Did you want to add anything? Let's see if Sorry, bro. You might just have to type. All right, we'll open the floor for questions from the audience. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A box. We've got one in already.
Yeah, we're keeping an eye on questions. We'll jump in with anything that we want to pick up. I mean, there's certainly some comments around representation versus tokenism, right? How important it is to be in spaces where there's an underrepresentation and feeling a level of confidence around that. I'm absolutely gutted that we can't hear Lewis. Lewis has so many amazing things to say. But I'm not sure what we can do about that, Lewis. It's one of those things, right? I've had a morning myself, technological challenges. You're not alone. So in terms of the kind of key themes that we've gone through, I mean, obviously the end result of this program is about reducing exclusion, right? And it's also about making sure that we have retained our young people on the program. We've worked really hard with them around developing their skills to make sure they flourish and whatever it is they do next, they succeed in. So positive destinations, as the term suggests, was really about, that's the kind of end goal. That's the kind of raison d'etre, if you like, of the program. So we know that young people, that the cohort that we were working with were extremely vulnerable to exclusion. Generally, the research tells us that around 29% of young people who are in alternative provision didn't sustain a positive destination after year 11. So that's kind of the benchmark, that's the sort of kind of worst case scenario for young people emerging from alternative provision in terms of where they finish their education. And this compares to their peers of about 5.2%. So you can see significant disadvantage for young people progressing from alternative provision. In terms of the young people that we saw on this program, in August 2023, when they progressed, 81% sustained an education, employment, or training outcome. That acronym EAT is education, employment, or training. for 5 out of the 6 months to March 2024. So, I mean, that's a pretty strong outcome, I think you would agree. And about 19% of them were NEET. Again, that's not ideal, but you know, there's a kind of there are census points in which you make judgments and kind of use benchmarks around this thing. So that doesn't mean that they continued to be NEET, but they were NEET at the point of measurement. So I mean, you know, we're really proud of that. There's room for improvement, as there always is. We've launched the next stage of the program, which is essentially it's now 3 times the size that it was previously. Is that right? Possibly more than that, actually. 4 times, maybe. My maths isn't great.
About 4.
Patrice knows every single name. So we've grown the program and we've extended into Asian girls and young Black girls. So we're looking potentially always continue to look at that level of vulnerability and making sure that we're adapting our coaching programs to target those particular vulnerabilities and how they show up in a young person's education and then their progression. So that positive destination theme is really about making sure that we keep our eye on the prize, right? Because it's all about the work that we do and then what happens next for the young person. That's the real measure of success.
Amazing. Thank you.
In terms of recommendations, I mean, these are the things that we think or we believe as a result of the work that we've done and the research that we've done through the program. This is what we believe are these are the things, the ingredients, or these create the conditions that we believe will lead to success for the young people that we have been talking about throughout this presentation, providing long-term early interventions. Now, our main program is 5 years. We didn't have the luxury of having that long on this program. We were trying out an adaptation over 2 years. That's still long-term, that, you know, the general kind of course of programs that are available for our young people, that's still a long-term program. And it's really around those transition points and that trusted adult relationship through those key transition points. Coaching and mentoring, we often see those 2 things are kind of, people use or misuse the language around what coaching looks like and what mentoring looks like. Patrice has talked about the coaching relationship. It's a very particular methodology and way of working with a young person, which develops agency in the young person for setting their targets, setting their goals and working towards them. Mentoring is, of course, the other stuff that happens in the program, which is actually supporting the young person around what their aspirations might be, or what their employment might look like, or what the experience of an individual has been in particular sectors or industries. But the combination of those 2 things help a young person realize potentially what's coming next for them. And making sure that there's a reflection of those young person's identities, as we talked about, and then applying those interventions into different groups of young people. So we're working through potentially, if race and identity is one thing we're looking at, we're also looking at special educational needs and disabilities, for example. Care leavers is another group that we might potentially be looking at developing a program for, and so on. So what we're looking at is how we wrap coaching programs or design programs which are really tackling the issue of vulnerability or disadvantage, which is showing up in a young person's life. So they're the kind of key recommendations that you'll see in the research reports. I see Lewis is back online. I'm not sure where we're at in terms of sound quality.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
You know what it is, yeah? You know, when you're trying to dismantle the system tries to take you down. That's what happens. You get the same. So I want every participant to know my recommendation is, yeah, do your work in hidden spaces where Zoom don't know about it or something. And this is not me trying to go against Zoom, but I'm just saying they don't want us to win. Do you get what I'm saying? I can't say us because it's only me that's having the issue. And do you know what the funny thing is? I never have tech issues. It's one of the things I pride myself on. So why they don't want me to win today, I don't know. But anyway, I'm happy to just only come in when Duro tells me to, because I've now missed significant parts. So at least we know I'm here, and I love everybody that's joined us today, and I hope you found value in this. But yeah, Duro, let me know if you need me to come in at any point, my friend.
No, for sure. Thank you, Lewis. So
Sure.
break down the system.
Okay. Apparently, Duro, there are some questions. So let me just have a quick look. We talked quite a lot about relationships. So there's a question that's come in, or a statement that's come in, which is around trusted relationships, absolutely key, which has come through really strongly. I think we would all agree in that. The skill around critical thinking is equally important and supports self-trust. Do you see that intersect between critical thinking and self-trust? And are outcomes such as I can trust myself and my decisions part of the outcomes? Is there any sense of that anecdotally in terms of how those things link in? Lewis, Patrice, any thoughts?
Gonna take that one first, so I'll jump in after.
Oh my word, Lewis, your sound has gone again. Patrice?
She didn't change it.
It's gone.
Could you just read that last bit of the question?
Yeah, sure. So essentially, what this question is saying is that there are lots and lots of things at play in a young person achieving a positive outcome as they move on, including trusted relationships. But is there anything that you see around critical thinking and self-trust that plays out in the young person that contributes to their outcomes? So is there anything about the young person that is developing through your time and your coaching relationship with them that actually the young person starts to trust themselves and their decisions?
Yeah, so I think this is what I was kind of talking about before in coaching sessions, right?
Yeah.
I think in coaching, because a lot of it is critical thought coming from that young person, as a coach, we're only there to ask questions. Essentially, they do 80% of the talking within those coaching sessions. And a lot of that talking is critical thinking, and it's being critical about anything that they're going through within their lives, including school. So yeah, I think it is linked. And I think we see quite a lot of it on the program, and it does help them to, I guess, once they graduate from the program, to then have belief that they can actually use their own agency and their own thoughts and their own critical thought to be a success in the future.
We've got a question from Erin Spencer, which talks about the spaces that we're bringing young people into, right, which is essentially the world of work and where microaggressions play out, and they might be experiencing that. If there is any appetite for employers actually developing more awareness around that and potentially coaching and supporting what's happening in the workplace. Before I invite anybody to speak on that, what I would say is there is definitely a move to and an appetite towards understanding and creating more diverse workspaces. Okay. Certainly, we are very careful about the employers that we work with, and we work very hard to make sure that our young people are being invited into welcoming spaces, and there is a level of understanding and awareness around the language that is used. We're an asset-based language organization, but also the environment that young people are stepping into and doing some work and preparing that space for that young person moving into. What I would say as a leader is there is less appetite for true, deep reflection and learning at a leadership level. And I don't mean a 2-day diversity course. I don't think that that is going to essentially move the needle, right? What you need is true, deep reflection on how inequity plays out in the system and in every single workplace in the UK. And if you don't have that level of deep reflection and learning, essentially, whatever your initiatives are, they won't hold up. As soon as an individual leaves or moves on and doesn't have the same level of commitment, or it's somehow been distilled in some way as it goes down through the organization, you will not this is my lived experience, you will not sustain any kind of cultural move towards developing an awareness around, whether it be microaggressions or any other areas of offence that are playing out in a culture of an organisation. It has to actually start at the top. And if you don't have that change and that level of commitment, in my experience, I will invite others to speak on that. You're not going to get any kind of change. And the appetite is almost immaterial, really, in my experience. Patrice, Lewis, I don't know if you guys want to speak on that.
That's if Zoom lets me speak. Is Zoom letting me speak or no? See what I'm saying? I'm not going to take long on that because I think there's other questions. I think you covered a lot of it, Ashley. I think the appetite for wanting to address these things is somewhat there. But what I will say is that, and it speaks back to something that Patrice mentioned earlier, there has to be a level of intentionality around what it is that you want to tackle, because one of the things that, you know, we've talked about a lot with Think Forward in terms of their own race equity journey and their broader EDI journey is that gaslighting is very real, and that happens within organizations. So if you want to address some of those issues that microaggressions are simply the fruit of, they're not the root of the problem, they're simply the fruit of that problem. To tackle those things requires people to be okay with the fact that you're prioritizing one particular aspect of discrimination, prejudice, and actually oppression. But if people are going to want to say, oh, well, actually, if we're going to do that, then we should also be thinking about this. And then suddenly you're gaslighting that issue by saying it's not as important as something else. Or you're trying to do oppression Olympics and saying, well, why are we only focusing, for example, on race? Or we actually also need to tackle this and also need to, that's when you don't get the real work done. So if you really want to get into tackling the root of the problem that the microaggression is the fruit of, then yeah, it requires a deep look at the systemic structures, cultures, and all of that. So yeah.
Agreed. I'm conscious of time. Do we have time for one more? I don't know if there is one more, or do you want to go on to the next and final slide?
Yeah, let's jump on to the next and final slide, if that's all right. Only because I know that, again, Lewis, I think it's slightly improved for a moment, your sound, but I do know, well, firstly, I want to thank the panel. Thank you all for participating and for making contributions and trying to unpack some of the research findings. Thank you to everybody who has attended and has been online and engaged in the last hour or so. And I'm really deeply sorry that Lewis has had tech issues, because he's an amazing contributor to these sorts of discussions. And I hope you guys get an opportunity to hear him again. Before I invite him in to just talk about some of the things that we'd like as follow-up, I also want to say, I want to recognise two people who are not actually on the panel. One is Kieran Lawrence, who was the coordinator on the Future Leaders programme, who essentially with Patrice, you know, scaffolded the programme, made sure that there were a number of opportunities for young people to participate in, and essentially mobilised the programme with Patrice. And of course, Charlene Theophile, who is the director of programmes, and she herself was the lead in terms of mobilising the programme, making sure that it was delivered on time and to target and so on. So lots of, you know, there's a village, right? There's a village that sits behind this program, holding this program up. And to all of the corporate partners that we've had, Nicolette Bassan and her team, making sure that we had amazing work readiness activities for our young people to access. So the village that sits behind this program is also worthy of recognition too, right? Lewis, did you want to say anything about the Phase 2 Future Leaders Programme and making sure that people register for any mentoring opportunities?
Please. So we are looking for Black professionals, i.e. men and women, who would be open to dedicating, and the model we're going for this time around means we'll need you to be willing to give 2 full days between the end of April and the end of May. So just 2 full days in order to be able to participate in being a mentor on this program. And we're also open to South Asian women who are professionals as well, who would like to put themselves forward to becoming mentors. We will have the full information for you in the coming couple of weeks, so that we would then be able to allow people to formally register, but you can express interest in being able to get the full information and putting yourself forward for that. I mean, you've heard everything today in terms of the value that it adds. One of the things I would have added if I didn't have the tech issues I was having is that many mentors spoke to the amount that they developed as a result of being able to mentor on this program. Many of those mentors learned things to do with understanding how to navigate generational differences in the workplace, as we talk about Gen Z and, in, you know, very soon Gen Alpha entering the workplace. Many of them found that valuable. Many of them found the ability to understand how to ask effective questions to young people and understand more about the experiences that they're bringing into different environments very valuable. And a lot of the mentors also just felt empowered in terms of taking more pride in their own identity as well, because they felt they had a safe space. So please don't think you're putting yourself forward just for what you can give. Please understand, when you're stepping into a space of Think Forward and 7PK, you're going to gain a lot too. So that second QR code on the screen there will allow you to be able to express interest, receive more information, and essentially say, yeah, do you know what? I'd be interested in mentoring. So one thing I will say is definitely put your name down and go from interest to commitment. That's all I'm going to say.
On that note, talking about Generation Alpha, how old do I feel right now? Thank you very much for that, Lewis, on that sour note to end. Thank you so much, everyone. And again, thank you for our people online participating. It's been fantastic. And yeah, read the report, and well, obviously the recording will be available too online. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.